Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bible Quests. Again, this is the Thursday edition. Glad you're able to join us again. We're going to have a controversial topic tonight. Not that we want to be controversial, but there are so many differences. Last time we talked about understanding the mystery, that you can't understand it, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of confusion that's going on. And we want to talk about a topic. I'm just going to say the word, but one of you guys bring in where it's misunderstood. The word is called, or it's two words, the Great Tribulation. And if I'm not mistaken, it's the theory that this Great Tribulation, which is mentioned in the Bible, is going to happen in the future, but it has not happened yet. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd say that's the popular theory, premillennialism, that most would hold to, that there's going to be a rapture followed by a 7-year period of tribulation. And
That's it. The rapture and tribulation, and all of that is a precursor to the kingdom.
yeah,
That the
yep,
kingdom's not here yet because the tribulation didn't happen yet and the rapture didn't happen yet. And that's the theory. Well, what does the scripture say about it? First of all, where did they get the concept from? Kenny?
Yeah, I think if you ask someone and you caught them off guard, most would say, "Oh, that's in Revelation." Mm-hmm. And the funny part is, if you go to Revelation, John says he's in the Revelation, he's in the tribulation with them, right there in the first chapter.
Don't go there yet, because I'm going to share my slides, and I got that slide there.
Right, but most won't give you that. Most will give you that, but where they're really pulling this from, I think, is Matthew 24. I think it's being taken out of context there, but it is addressed in Matthew 24. So I think we said, talking beforehand, that we see it 3 times, that word tribulation, especially the Great Tribulation, comes up in that passage.
Let's go there. Let's go to Matthew 24. The first time I see it is in verse 21. Is that where you were going?
Verse 9.
Yeah. Oh, then 9?
Will deliver you up. Yeah. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. But again, instead of just diving and looking for the word, what's the context here of the passage, right? What's Jesus talking to them about? And is this future? Is this, a future event? And if so, where future, right? Mm-hmm. Is it in their time?
Is it okay? So, future, but not ours. But before you go there, then they will deliver you up. Who's the you? His followers.
Right.
Specifically the apostles. Only a few of them even. In this context.
The apostles, his disciples.
Correct.
All right, so wait a minute. So you can deliver you up to tribulation. What is tribulation? Suffering, right? It's really severe suffering. When you say, because I suffered, I was telling you earlier that I had some tooth work. It was a little suffering. That wasn't tribulation, right? Tribulation is really heavy-duty suffering. In fact, he says that there, verse 9, put you to death, and you're going to be hated by all nations. Who are all nations? Who are the people that are represented by all nations? I'm laying this out because this plays, I didn't realize this. Yeah. What's that?
Both Jew and Gentile, the message is going to be going out to everybody.
Right.
They're all going to hate you. Okay, that's important. They're going to put you to death. Okay. And so what you were saying, Kenny, okay, it's in the future from when Jesus was saying it, because it said they will do this. So did it happen, sometime near the time of death of Jesus and the early portion of the movement, or is it still to come? Well, the premillennialist says it's going to come in the future.
Right.
All right.
And that's where kind of the problem you run into if you you read this passage and you look at the context. And one, he's giving signs of what this tribulation is going to look like. So if you're going to say this is about end times, and you're going to want to pull this because they'll want to say Revelation is end times, that's what they want to say. But we know that he says it's going to come like a thief in the night. Mm-hmm. There will be no signs. He's giving signs here. So that tells me from a logical standpoint that, okay, this isn't my future. This is the future of who he's talking to.
Right.
And he's letting them know
Wait a minute. Let let me dissect what you just said. They're saying that this is some of the signs so that you know when he's coming, that there's going to be a rapture, there's going to be tribulation, and that's when the Lord's going to come and he's going to set up his kingdom. But you're saying, according to what you're saying here, where did you get the concept that there will not be any signs coming? Did you say that, or does the Bible say that?
That's not what Kenny Hemmler's saying. He states a couple times that he'll come like a thief in the night. When does a thief give you signs that they're coming? They don't come and tell you, hey, I'm going to come rob you tonight, so make sure you're not home. We don't know when he's going to come. And in this, he tells them of that day.
No one knows.
Right.
Okay. All right. So there's a contradiction there starting already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Verse 36, by that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven.
No one knows. So it's going to be a thief and a knife type of thing. What were we going to say, Carl?
1 Thessalonians 5:2, again, talking about the coming of the Lord is like a thief in the night. He says, we know this. You yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. So when that day comes, there are no signs. The thief doesn't call ahead and say, are you going to be there? I'm coming on. That visitor does that. And one of the things I wanted to point out, this is a private conversation Jesus is having with Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Mark gives us the details of who's sitting there with him. This is not something he was publicly speaking. Later on, Stephen and some others clearly teach these things to all the people that have come to Christ who need to know these things. But this is a very private conversation, preparing them for his leaving and what they're going to face after he's gone. So he's speaking with these very close-knit, specifically apostles, but it will expand later to some other of the disciples that they're going to suffer these things. But it is meant to be a short term, at the longest, the first setting up of the gospel age, not something that's supposed to go on for 2,000 years,
right?
Which is where people have it today.
What is he saying there in verses 18, 19, and 20 of Matthew 24?
He's talking about when something happens in the holy place. This is in Jerusalem. Luke makes that really clear. These are armies surrounding Jerusalem. This is the destruction of the temple. Right. He tells them, don't go defend the temple. A good Jew's going to go defend, and a good Christian's going to run because the temple doesn't matter anymore. They're the temple now. And he tells them,
well, wait a minute.
Go to the
wait a minute. He's identifying. He's identifying
it's the language of Sodom and Gomorrah is what it is. Jerusalem has become the new Sodom and Gomorrah. They rejected the Christ. They rejected God. And they're going to be destroyed, and he tells the faithful flee. It's the same language. And in fact, he says the angels will help gather them out of the city. That's Sodom and Gomorrah language.
Right.
It's something they very well understood.
Okay. This one's got me now because he talks about this, that when you see the abomination of desolation, which are the words that Daniel said about the kingdom when it's going to be established. And Jesus ties that in because he says, in verse 15, so when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy places, what is that? That's when someone that's not holy, I'm going to say it, Rome, is standing in the holy place. That's the abomination. And then it can't be the end of time because in that verse he says, if you're in Judea, get out of town.
Yeah. Right. Well, what good is that going to be at the end of time?
Yeah, but there ain't going to be any town. Yeah, right.
The temptation would be defend Jerusalem and defend the temple. So I know what he's talking about because of Luke. It's interesting in Matthew he says, let the reader understand. We talked about that in the other one. People who read Daniel and knew that context understood what he was talking about. Luke is writing to a Greek, to a Roman Theophilus, who doesn't know Daniel, and so he explains what it is. In Luke chapter 21, he says in verse 20, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, know that its desolation is near. He doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't say, let the reader understand, Theophilus. He says, Theophilus, this is what it is. So you're right. It's the Roman armies.
Right. And then in verse 21, back in Matthew 24, after he says all of that, pray that your flight in 20, it might not be in winter on a Sabbath, because this is going to be a bad thing. For then there will be great tribulation, such as not has been seen from the beginning of the world until now? No, and never will be. So this great tribulation is going to be so unique. It never happened before, and it's never going to happen again after this particular great tribulation. And that's where the premillennialists say, yeah, and that because it never happened yet. Is that true that there was never a great tribulation that Jesus is talking about happen? And I'll tell you, we only have 5 minutes left because I want to keep this at 15 minutes. And if you guys let me do this, I've got proof that the tribulation that millennials say is in the future, I got proof. Proof. Let me say that word again, that it happened. Mm-hmm. And let me show you, I'm going to share my slides.
Right.
Hold on a second. There we go. Here we go. Slides. Let me first start the slides. And now let me share my screen over here. Screen. Let's just do that one window. And I'm going to do that one. Okay, so
here we go.
I'm going to start with what you had already said earlier when I shut you down there, Kenny, because you were
Sorry.
giving us a spoiler alert. But John was in the tribulation. Mm-hmm. And that's the only place that's mentioned in Revelation. Let me see if I can get my slide changer here. And let's see. In verse 9 of John chapter 1, John says, I, John. Do you see the screen?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I, John, your brother and partner in the tribulation and the kingdom and the what? Partner in the tribulation and the kingdom. And the patient endurance that are in Jesus was on the island called Patmos on account. So we're familiar with that account of the word of God. All right. He says he not only experienced the tribulation, he's in it, right? But he's a partner with them in the kingdom. How can you say that if the kingdom hasn't come yet, or if the tribulation hasn't come yet? Well, let's look on. Let's further. Were there any other apostles? I'm having a hard time seeing my slides. Let me get this out of the way. So, okay, now I know my next slide. Did any of the apostles, they talk about the suffering, which is what the tribulation is? Did they ever talk about? Yeah, let's go with 1 Peter. Mm-hmm. In this, Peter, 1 Peter 1, verse 6, in this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes through it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor in the revelation of Jesus Christ. If anybody's facing fire, that's not minor. That's major. And then let's look at what he says. Paul says, rejoice in hope. This is Romans 12. Be patient in tribulation. Be constant in prayer. Contribute to the needs of the saints. This is all present tense. This was written around 60, right? Somewhere's around 60, I think. Maybe a little later, but anyway, somewhere's around it's the mid-century, mid-first century. Contribute to the needs of the saints and seek to show hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. And then in Romans 8, verse 17, and if children, then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him, in order that we may also be glorified with him. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. And so he's talking about they're already in suffering. They're in turmoil. We know the suffering that Paul personally went through. And so there is. Further down in verse 35 of the same chapter, who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? As it is written, for your sake we are all being killed all the day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. You mean that's not going to happen for 1,000, 2,000 years? He's talking in the present tense. He's saying we're already in this. John said he's a partner with the tribulation. If that's not tribulation, being slaughtered like sheep, then what is tribulation? Then there's no such thing. But was this tribulation unique or rare? In other words, only happened to a couple of them. No, Now I want to share with you some recorded history. Allow me to introduce Cornelius Tacitus. He was a Roman orator. He was a senator. He was a great Roman historian, and one of his books is called The Annals of Imperial Rome. And he records a lot of things that happened in the first century. I'm not going to go through everything he wrote. It's a thick book. I just want to quote a few things from him, from his book that he wrote. He lived from 56 AD to 120. I'm going fast because I want to try to get through this in a few minutes. 56 AD to 120. So he's right in the sweet spot, what we're talking about. This is what he wrote. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty, in other words, crucifixion, during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. So he's already telling us about history we're familiar with, all right? He's recognizing that this movement, it was originated by Christ. So he's collaborating. Well, he was executed right during the time of the reign of Tiberius under Pontius Pilate. We know that. This is an enemy of Christ saying this now, but he goes on to say, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. We're not there yet. He's not talking about tribulations or tortures yet, but I'm setting the stage on what he's telling us. He calls the new movement a most mischievous superstition. He writes this in a history book. He calls it an evil that broke out. What's the attitude of Rome? Christians are bad. Look what he says. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all who pleaded guilty. Then upon their information, an immense multitude, not a little, a few, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. He's talking about Nero was putting the blame on Christians for the fire in 64 AD, that six-day fire. The world hated Christians. Nero hated Christians. The populace hated Christians. But what were they guilty of? Why were they hate? What it says here, because of the hatred against mankind. The whole empire hated Christians. And look what happens. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths, covered with the skins of beasts. They were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt, to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. It's also recorded that Nero was doing this for, he loved to hear the screams. I mean, just look at their punishment. What do you think the Colosseum was all about? If you're in the audience and you're not aware of this, what was the Colosseum about? Primarily for entertainment. And most of the entertainment in this time period was when they put thousands and thousands of Christians over years, not in one day, in for entertainment to handle what he's talking about. Torn by beasts and dogs and nailed to crosses for entertainment. And here's the thing, most people don't realize that this torture, this suffering, this tribulation and death, you know how long it lasted? 300 years.
Yeah.
It ended in the beginning of the 4th century. We're talking 300 years. And Tacitus was not the only guy talking about this stuff. Here we go. Lucian of Samosata. He was a Roman from the 2nd century, the mid-2nd century. And just like Tacitus, he wasn't a Christian. He was extremely sarcastic towards Christians. He hated them. He called them misfits. And even though he called them misfits, he knows them very well. He tells us something about what was common among them. He knew what it was that makes a Christian a Christian. As an aside, someone once told me years ago, if this was all true and Christ was raised from the dead and Christians were like this, don't you think it would have been on the news? Well, they didn't have news. So we were saying, wouldn't you think more people wrote about it? Well, when I was asked that question 15, 20 years ago, I didn't know that these guys existed. They wrote about it. He wrote about it. This is across the whole empire. Look what he said. The Christians, worship a man to this day, the distinguished personage who introduced their novel rites and was crucified on that account. You see, these misguided creatures start with the general conviction that they are immortal for all time, which explains the contempt of death and voluntary self-devotion, which are so common among them. Because of misguided creatures.
Just
And notice,
deplorable.
deplorable. Hey, I heard that today. We are deplorables. Yeah, we are Bible-thumping deplorables. Uh-huh. It's worse back then. Notice what he said about their mindset, though, which is interesting. They start with the general conviction that they are immortal. And he knows that that conviction is based on Jesus Christ, the one who they follow. He was
Yeah, the first
crucified.
fruit. Yeah.
Yeah. He knows what drives Christianity, what it is that motivates these misguided creature. And they think they're immortal from the start. And it was so common. This is the point I want to get to. It was so common among them, not just a couple, but so many of them, to face death without any fear whatsoever. Why is he saying that? Why is he writing this down? Why did Tacitus write that and others? Because thousands upon thousands of Christians were accepting the torture, the death that was being perpetrated on them by this evil Roman Empire. And like I said before, this went on for 300 years, this kind of death. Diocletian in 301, he sent out orders to the whole, the storm, I call them stormtroopers, the Roman guard throughout the empire. He'd dictate, say, Christians that don't give up their scriptures, burn them, kill them. And there's history written that they were meeting in, let's say, there were wooden buildings in those days. And what they would do is they would lock them up in the building. They'd chain the front door and light the whole thing up on fire. The whole church building, the whole building with the Christians inside screaming. For the first 300 years, guys, this was a risky business to be a Christian. To the point of losing your life, your family. You don't come over, you don't give up Christ, we're going to kill your family. Why? Because your loyalty is to Christ. It needs to be to Caesar. This was tribulation.
And so Jesus warned them ahead of time this was coming.
And that's what you just read. Yes.
Right.
He warned them this is coming. John said, I'm part of this tribulation with you. Paul said it's going to end. Don't worry about it. This was all for words of it. Okay, but let me back up. I want to close with a couple of examples. Do we have any records of such people as Tacitus and Lucian describe? Yeah. Here's one that is well known, Ignatius. I'm sure many of us heard of him. He was a bishop of Antioch. He was one of those misfits who died as a martyr in the beginning of the 2nd century. And this is a man who actually displayed the exact contempt for death that Lucian was so puzzled about. How can these guys be this way? What happened in his case, he was arrested and they put him on a boat, get him over to Rome, where he was going to be slaughtered for entertainment in the Colosseum. And while he was on his way to Rome, going to his execution, he wrote a letter describing what he was going through, what he was thinking, what his concerns were. I mean, we would. Oh, I'm going there. This is what's worrying me. I want you to read what he said. I pray that nothing on heaven or earth will prevent me from attaining the goal of Jesus Christ. Let me be subjected to fire, the cross, fights with wild beasts, having my body cut and torn apart on the rack, my limbs mangled, my whole body crushed, any of the devil's cruel tortures, just as long as I attain the goal of Jesus Christ. What's
Amen.
this guy excited about?
Wow.
He's excited that he's going to die one of these horrible deaths. Where did he get the idea that it was going to be one of these kinds of deaths? Because that was what was going on for 300 years. People were being treated this way. He was excited being killed for the Lord so that he can attain the goal of Jesus Christ. When you have this kind of phenomenon, by the way, you have to explain it. Why would he be so excited about things like that? Why was he willing to sacrifice his life, proving he was totally committed to the Lord. And what this is collaborating evidence, by the way. supporting evidence of the fact that the contempt of life these Christians had.
Right.
That Lucian, he recognized that was common. I mean, what could have given Ignatius that kind of faith and comfort? I suggest he was reading the book of Revelation, for one, because it talked about this kind of torture. And there were many other Christians, not just him. These are historical facts. The movement faced the most severe culture. Never like this happened before. Cultural, social, economical, political conditions. And Jesus said, it's not going to ever happen again. That's putting it mildly what they went through. Why? Because they were confessing Jesus Christ as Lord. It meant you will lose everything. The Roman Empire. And I want to close with this one last story. Ignatius was not the only one. There were thousands of them. And we have some history on this particular one. It's very interesting. Did you ever hear of a woman named Perpetua? She was a young Christian woman, about 20 years old. In fact, she was 20 years old. She was a noble woman. That meant she was from a wealthy family. She was living the high life in a rich family, but she died as a martyr in Carthage. And this was in the beginning of the 3rd century, around 200 AD. In this painting, we see, well, there's people standing around her. This is history. I'll explain to you where we got it from. And they're not angry with her. And actually, some of them were pleading with her. They're begging her. That young man there, that was Hilarius. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was the governor. That'd be similar to Pontius Pilate. He doesn't want to execute her. He's pleading with her. Just make a sacrifice to our God, our Roman gods. If you did that, you can go free. And then the old man was there sitting there. That's her father. He's saying, daughter, he's pleading with her. Have pity on me, your gray head. Don't abandon me. You're going to leave me. Who's going to take care of me? Give up your pride, daughter. The governor says, yeah, look at your younger sisters over there. They can't take care of your father. What's going to happen to your father once you die? And then the man on the left, he's holding an official document. She would receive the document, she would have, as evidence that her duties were paid. The sacrifice to the gods were given. But you say to a Christian, it was not an option. To Perpetua, who's now a Christian, this was unthinkable. She's not going to betray her Lord. And here's what made it even harder, guys. While she was in prison, waiting for her sentencing, she gave birth to a baby boy. And the governor tells her, think about your baby. What's going to happen to your son? And don't forget it, this is a time when babies were thrown onto the garbage heap. What did they call it then? You remember what they called it? Infanticide. It was common. And he's telling her, think about your baby, Perpetua. Okay, where's this all going? Well, these are some of the details that we have about her thanks to a diary that she kept in prison. It was discovered, and that's what the painting was based on, some of the stuff in her diary. She could have freed herself. She could have chose the alternative, but she wanted to remain faithful to Jesus Christ rather than to mock him. She could have easily made the sacrifice to a Roman idol and save her baby and her own life. She could have chosen to return to the rich life, that comfortable life as a noble woman. But she chose something different. In fact, she turned her diary over to somebody else to finish the story because it was her time the next day to go. And so someone else closed the diary, and that she wasn't alone. The day of their victory dawned, and they marched from prison to the amphitheater joyfully as though they were going to heaven, with calm faces, trembling, if at all, with joy rather than fear. Contempt for death, proof right there. That's what Lucian said. That was so common among these misguided creatures. When Christians were brought to trial, they all had the opportunity to spare their own life. All they had to do was curse Jesus and call Caesar Lord. Then you're free to go. But this 20-year-old woman, along with many others, thousands of others, chose this instead. You know, when I read passages like, oh, death, where is your victory? Where is your sting? In 1 Corinthians 15, I have a greater appreciation for that statement of how many human beings, Christians, went through what you're seeing on the screen. These are only some paintings of historical facts. Thousands upon thousands of Christians, tens of thousands, because this happened over 300 years. Tribulation for 300 years under the hands of the Roman Empire. Don't tell me, you can tell I'm a little passionate about this. Don't tell me the tribulation that John spoke about, that he was in Revelation, and the tribulation that Jesus talked about is sometime in the future that didn't happen yet. No, there it is. You're looking right at it. Hope I didn't go overboard. But the
Very clear
tribulation
historical evidence.
happened. What's that?
Very clear historical evidence. It's powerful.
And that's what I live on. I got to stop my slides. Let me see. I don't want to hang us up. I did that before. Here we go. Stop our slides. There we go. Okay. When I hear that the tribulation hasn't happened yet, and that's when the kingdom is going to come, it doesn't fit scriptures, and it doesn't fit what you just said, Carl, historical evidence. Oh my goodness, that 15 minutes just went crazy. We might have to split this one up into 2 sessions. But I had to go through it because the tribulation is right there in your face. When you look at the scriptures that talks about it, and then you look at the historical evidence that it happened, you can't come to any other conclusion. So anybody that says that the tribulation is yet in the future, I want you to come and challenge us to show us from scripture and history that it didn't happen yet.
No.
Yeah, how can you can't prove a negative? I don't know how you can do that, but you get the point.
Very, very moving. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, this was part of my series on proving the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Yep.
And it's based on evidence. My whole experience in becoming a Christian is based on evidence, not on somebody's theory or somebody's whatever. It's got to come from Scripture, and the evidence is in the Scripture. Oh boy, I can go on all night, but I won't. Hey, who brought this topic up? I want to thank you. I think I suggested it. Didn't I suggest it?
Thank you, Self. It was good, though. Very, very, very thorough and very helpful.
Yep.
All right. I don't know if you're familiar with any of that history, but it's good. In fact, I got references besides Tacitus and Lucian on that. Guys, I'm out of breath. I apologize for taking over the last 15 minutes, but
it's all right. It was good stuff.
I want you to enjoy the rest of the evening. Anybody in the audience, go to BibleQuest.org. You can reach out using the form in the Contact Us page. Give us your thoughts, your comments, your thumbs up or your thumbs down. And if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Will it help us get more exposure? Remember to hit that subscribe button, and that'll also let you know when we're coming out with new episodes. And send us an email, BibleQuest.org @gmail.com. There's a lot of ways you can contact us where we want to hear from you. Guys, have a great evening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Good night.